Let me tell you a story about a serial killer who converted his victims into hamburgers. His name is Joseph Roy Metheny, whose urge to kill started when his wife did something unexpected to him. Hey everyone, welcome back. If you're new here, my name's Criminate. Don't forget to leave a like if you enjoy the video. Let's get started. Tonight's story, which you are about to listen, began after a revenge. The subject ended with a passion for the taste of human flesh, that sensation of dominion and control that is obtained later. Taking the life of another, this is what motivated this man, Joseph Roy Metheny. A subject with morbid obesity in appearance, penetrating and thick features, intimidating smile, with a height of 6 foot 1 feet and weighing more than 330 pounds. Mentioned in his statement, the next time you go down the road and find a hamburger stand, you have to think carefully about this story, since you never know who you could be eating. Protagonist Joseph Roy Metheny, who was born March 2, 1955 in Baltimore, USA, within a family of 6 children, where most of the time they were neglected by their father since their father had a problem with alcohol and spent money on alcohol. Their mother had to work hard to be able to keep them. At the age of 6, his father died in a car accident, and the children went to the care of his mother, who assumed the reins of the family, neglecting them even more so since, in order to solve all the monetary burden, had to work up to double shifts to earn more income as a waitress and food truck driver. He and his brothers were often sent to live with other families in the system of foster homes, which allows children in dangerous situations. Joseph took refuge in the food and began to eat uncontrollably, which caused a serious problem in his obesity when he grew up. At 18 years old, he joined the American Army in 1973 and served in Germany. During his service, Joseph became addicted to drugs, noticeably changing his behavior. This being the beginning of many problems that would be coming. His mother began to notice the deterioration of her son, who moved away from the family once again. Joseph was known by his friends as Tim or Small, since he was tall 6 foot 1 and had a large build. His addiction gradually led him to follow the same example of his father, and he began to frequent bars and lived with street people who didn't have a home. South of Baltimore, it is there where he meets a woman who does not know his name, with which he would have his first child. After finding out they was going to be a father, he got a job in a company where everything was already going well. He was considered as an intelligent person, well-spoken, and very polite. What few knew was he had an addiction problem. It all started in the night of July 1994. Joseph was at work because he worked driving a forklift in the Pallets company, which was dedicated to the sale and manufacture of pallets. This night, he worked late and stayed overtime. At the end of the day, he headed home, as usual. When he opened the door and turned on the light and realized that the house was empty, not even his 6-year-old son was there. Not even his wife. She had taken everything and she had abandoned it. When he saw the silence of the home, he became angry, not so much because of the loss of his wife, who was addicted to drugs and with which he frequently fought with, but because he loved his son. In fact, he cataloged his wife as a bum that consumed substances of all kinds. After a few days, he began to look for them everywhere without having success. It was about 6 months after some people told him that they had seen her on the other side of the city with a subject who forced her intimate services in exchange for drugs. Note that the child was present, until after a few days, his ex-wife and her partner were arrested for consumption and possession of illicit substances, but took them to minor charges for child neglect and abuse. Joseph couldn't do anything about it. His wife returned to their son, so he was filled with hatred towards his wife and partner. He felt at one point that they had to pay for what they had taken from him. So he started to search for his son and for them both, because he found out that they had been let go, and the only punishment was that the police took the child away from them. That's when he discovered they were living under a bridge with drug addicts and homeless people. Then one day, he made the decision to go looking for them, but unfortunately, he didn't find them. However, he found 2 people lying down, who who were in an old and dirty mattress, so at seeing them reminded him of the reason why they had taken his son away, and he broke out anger against them, depriving them of their lives. After the fact, he hid them in some bushes and continued searching through the areas near the place that same night. He searched on nearby bridges. It is then where he observes that close to where he had committed the murders, he found two women under the bridge, so he went towards them and tried to obtain information about the whereabouts of his wife. One of them walked a few meters toward him. This is where he questioned them to get the information, but due to the influence of substances, she did not reason and acted as if she did not know nothing. By not getting what he wanted, he started hitting her and then abusing her and finally ended her life. When he had finished with her, he dragged her towards some bushes and there he left. Then went for the next woman and she did the same. She wasn't sure who he was talking about, because of that he murdered her. But when he was about to throw her into the bushes with the other girl, he observed an old man fishing next to the river that was looking. So he took a tube out that was among the trash and ran towards him. When that old man wanted to react, he received a series of blows that ended his life. Once Joseph gained his senses, he actually dragged the bodies of the victims on one side of the Patapsco River. He hid them with stones, then washed himself in the river and tried to clean the place as much as possible. He could not leave any trace. That night he mentioned that he committed the 5 murders in approximately 7 hours. One night in 1994, he attracted Katie Magaziner in the factory he worked. They were consuming substances, and if she refused intercourse with him, he took her neck and deprived her of breathing until murdering her. After the fact, she ended up in a shallow grave in a small forest behind the factory where it happened unnoticed and where it remained 6 months. That I know of, he tore off his head and threw it away in the trash. The body remained there some years. On August 2, 1995, the bodies of the addicts, who were identified as Randall Brewer and Randy Baker. Weeks later, Metheny was accused of both murders, since someone that night saw a subject that was overweight that wandered around the bridges. So when investigating, they found the whereabouts of probable suspect Joseph Metheny. He was denied freedom. He didn't post bail and had to stay 18 months in Baltimore City Jail, waiting to go to trial, though there was no evidence that would incriminate him. After the trial, it had lasted a week, he was released due to lack of evidence, since it was established that the perpetrator had been another subject. When he was released, he went to his previous employment and asked his boss to return him to his job at the wooden pallet company. And his boss agreed, since he was considered hardworking. But not only that, he too granted Joseph's request to stay in a small trailer that he had inside the property, with the promise that he will monitor the place, since having been in prison, he had no place to stay. So he gave him the keys to the whole place from his own goodwill. But what he didn't know was that Joseph had other plans in mind, since the company was on an isolated street with a dead-end road, which was a perfect place to commit his fantasies. In November 1996, he attracted Kimberly Lyne Spicer, who he stabbed until depriving her of her life after she resisted having intercourse with him. He buried the body inside the factory. This is the precise moment where he mentioned that he cut the meat of his victim and put them inside milk containers and then placed them in the refrigerator. During that week, he put a small hamburger stand where he assured he mixed pork and beef with human flesh and that no one could notice the difference in the flavor. Even he mentioned that many people told him that the hamburgers were the best. He noted that everything was going good until he ran out of special meat. On December 8, 1996, led to his new victim named Rita Kemper, who he mentioned that they used drugs for a long time inside the trailer. Until he tried to tear off her clothes, she refused to have intercourse with him, and in desperation she began to scream, but there was no one to help. So, in an oversight, she ran out of the trailer and Joseph ran after her and dragged her back. He said he was going to murder her. After that, she managed to escape again. She ran until she saw a wired fence which had spikes on top. But that wasn't a problem for her, so she jumped and ran towards the road, and a guy from a truck stopped to see her. He took her to a nearby telephone where they called the police. Joseph picked up his clothes, since he knew that they would soon go for him, but when leaving the trailer, one of the officers was already there. He told him to get on the ground, so they took him into custody, and they began to interrogate him. As he was read all of the accusations, he denied them, for which he had been detained for one of them. That's when the girl mentioned that she was going to end up like the other girls who he buried in the forest. Immediately, he denied such words, adding that he did everything with her consent, so they let him go free. When he saw that perhaps the police could go to the scene to check that everything was fine, Joseph asked a friend to help him dig up Kimberly's body, which was still inside the factory. Then on the 15th of December 1996, his friend denounces him before the authorities, arguing he asked him to help him move the body of a woman he had buried on the side of the trailer. When heading to the location, the police arrested him again, and they even arrested the owner of the business for alleged complicity. Then they asked Joseph to tell them where he had buried Kimberly. He gave them the exact location, and when digging they found the body of a woman. That same day, once the interrogation started, he confessed to other crimes. Among them was the previous victim Katie Magaziner, so that led the police to the place where he had buried her. They found a shallow grave where there was buried remains. Much of the skull was missing, but it was possible to identify the victim through her dental records. They obviously belonged to Katie, but days later, he claimed to be a serial killer and that he had committed 13 murders. According to him, he threw the bodies into the Patapsco River and that they had never found them, further stating that much of his victims he had cut into parts and that he had saved them to eat it later. He then stated he came up with the idea of setting up a hamburger stand to sell human flesh combined with the other animal meat. At first the statements were shocking, but as the days passed, the veracity of his words began to be questioned. Every day he was interrogated in a small room, since the researchers wanted to clarify and shelve many unsolved cases. Trying to find out what he had done, he was taken out from jail daily, and they took him from one place to another so that he could tell the researchers where he dumped the bodies. Like this, a month passed, and they were never able to find any victim of which he presumed to have murdered. At this point, the detectives didn't know if he was telling them the truth or if he was just delusional, since what he said sounded fictional to be true. The main problem of investigating Joseph Martin is that he was also a liar and had the ability to create stories. While he said everything in 1997, he was tried for the Rita Kemper case, the last victim that managed to escape, and was sentenced to 50 years in prison for attempting to kidnap and abuse Rita. In 1998, he pleaded guilty for the murder of Katie Magaziner, but on the 14th of July 2000, he was sentenced to life without parole. No one understood if Joseph was lying for taste or if his mind was so unbalanced. No evidence was ever found of the crimes he allegedly committed. It was not verified whether he actually opened his meat stall to sell the body of his victims. The only murders that could be verified were two. His mental imbalance was notable, which led him to create false confessions. He mentioned that the words "sorry will never come out of my mouth, because they would be a lie. I am more than willing to give my life for what I have done, so that God judges me and can send me to hell for eternity. I just enjoyed it." Saturday, August 5, 2017, he was mysteriously found dead in his cell around 3 in the afternoon at the Western Correctional Institution in Cumberland, Maryland. He died by unknown causes at age 62. This case is a clear example that not all murderers confess to is true, since many tend to take credit for crimes they did not commit with the sole purpose of being important and recognized. I hope you enjoyed this video and had an excellent day. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, and until next time.